I would like to welcome you to the 5th session of the Congress. This is the last session of the day, and today, in this session, we will talk about the capacity allocation, and we have significant names from valuable companies, and part of them worked for public authorities, and also we have elegant speakers who are still working for the public authorities, and I will be moderating this session, and hopefully we will have great insights here today. Speaking of capacity allocation mechanisms, I will ask 3 questions, and I'm sure our panelists will share their experience with us. And since November 2007, we have worked with different capacity allocation mechanisms, and we have obtained experiences, and today we will discuss about them. And we will discuss whether we should have a mixed method today. I will give the floor to the first speaker, Ömer Fatih Cihan from IDEM Energy. As said before, we have speakers from different backgrounds, and Ömer Fatih was graduated from Middle East Technical University Department of Electric and Electronic Engineering. And I will start with Ömer Bey. As I said earlier, November 2007 was a milestone, and thank you. First of all, I would like to welcome you all, and on behalf of myself and my company, I will tell you what happened since 2007. In 2002, there was an allocation of 3.5 gigawatts, and it was hard to finance back then. Then in 2005, the regulations were issued, and part of them were financed. After 2008, more than 3,500 megawatts were installed, and the investors found it as a profitable investment, and the application was 10 times the capacity allocation. However, the competition was held in 2010, and the prices were increased due to the consumer price index increase. After the competition, YEKDEM was in foreign exchange, and with the developed turbine technologies, many of those projects were commissioned, and then $cent kilowatt-hour model was launched, and the tender was made in 2017, and there was the minus prices and plus prices, and 3,000 megawatts was allocated. And because of the increased prices, it became profitable, and that's how they were licensed. And then YEKA method was developed, so there was a change of terminology all the time, and with YEKA there was another competition in 2019, 1000 megawatt. In 2020 it was slightly changed, and it became a cheap energy from renewable. It used to be high price, and the renewable energy started subsidizing it. And because it was expected to be launched early, there was a limit. The earlier it was to be commissioned, the higher the AUF would be. And this right was granted to the investors, and now we are talking about the storage facilities. As IDEM Renewable, we have 3 wind plants, and they were launched after 2013, and we chose the projects with a lower contribution share. Along with that, they decided Krush and then USD again. It was right considering the conditions of that date, but that can be seen already, and in 2022 we would have achieved higher capacities. There were some mistakes made, but depending on the conditions of the day, those decisions were made. And then with the capacity method, capacity increases were also allocated, and with the capacity increases, it was initially 0.3 megawatt, 0.5 megawatt, and because we had a low capacity factor, we didn't get a capacity increase, but because of the market conditions and with the development of the technology, we also increase our capacity, and it will turn into a project of 400 megawatts. We couldn't do that 5 years ago because the prices were too low, but now this project will return the investment in 5 to 6 years. Of course, different methods are being implemented depending on the conditions of the day. So that's all I want to say in summary. Thank you very much for this comprehensive summary. Murtaza Bey, you are one of the seniors in the industry, and you work for Kalyon Energy, and you are the winner of the first YEKA GES and first YEKA RES, and you are making progress in YEKA RES. Considering YEKAs and the other processes you followed, what can you tell us about different capacity allocation methods? Thank you, and I would like to greet all the audience respectfully. Because of YEKA, we had a lot of experience, and it is one of the most important methods in capacity allocation, and in the history of the Republic, it has greatly contributed to technology advancements, and this shows us that regardless of the mechanism, the only purpose of the allocation should not be capacity increase, because the energy supply is highly important for the independence of the country, and sometimes we can say that it is the most important thing to assure the future of the country, and in all these capacity increases, the initial purposes should not be capacity increase. As you also know, it first started with YEKDEM, and of course YEKDEM was a very important mechanism, and today we have a certain capacity in the wind and the solar, and we found that there were some local contribution mechanisms, and today we see it was partly limited. That is important because the world has gone through a process over the last few years, and sometimes we say the world is really great because the resources are available everywhere. However, you may find that the strategic products being inaccessible suddenly, like the chip crisis. Also, there are major polar changes. We are going towards a unipolar world now. That's why there are barriers for the Chinese technology supply. Today we have the solar panel factory, and the capacity is 8,000 megawatt in Turkey now, and we are ranked the 4th or 5th in terms of the production of the solar panels. But when you go out on the market, you cannot find them because the demand is 2.5 gigawatts. However, the production capacity is 8 gigawatt, but you cannot find the solar panels. It is because the cells are actually imported from China. While evaluating the capacity allocation mechanisms, we need to see how much capacity was actually put to use, and while doing that, how much national technology did we gain, because the current deficit is the most important problem that we have, and the most important reason for that is the imports exceeding the export. And we can actually assure it with capacity allocation mechanisms, and it was also mentioned earlier, YEKTA mechanism or YEKA, and those capacity allocation mechanisms should be actually eliminated now. And we are yet at the beginning, and renewable energy has always been supported by the public policies, and the most important instruments are the capacity allocation mechanisms. I will give you an example. United States of America released two important mechanisms in the last 2 years. Capacity allocation mechanisms was released. One of them is about increasing the renewable energy. $300 billion tariff support will be granted, and that is the cradle of capitalism. Along with that, $63 billion will be invested in the renewable energy technologies in order to produce them within the states, and it is 7 cents per watt. When you sum it, it is 17 cents per watt in solar panel in terms of the support mechanism, and all of them will ensure independence in energy, and that will be provided in a way to increase the independence in energy. In YEKTA we had the USD based support. Even if you produce it 100% locally, raw materials are like gold, and they are commodities listed in the international exchange markets. Therefore, in wind and hydro, some people found it very low and some found it very high. And in terms of the financing of the projects, it was very important, and there were extra supports for local production, for the tower and for the blades, And today we witness that we have achieved a major capacity, and this is an important contribution. And also for tower production, we have international companies, and there is an employment of 8,000, 9,000 people, and that is the success of Yekdam, and that should be continued. Personally, I don't think that they will support the industry. Even if this contribution is low, that still should be maintained. And then we had YECA, and it is a very nice structure as well, because you increase the capacity on one hand, and while doing it, you also structure mechanisms that will impact the macroeconomic balances to establish R&D facilities. In YECA Solar, we experienced that actually, and there was an obligation to have a foreign technology partner. That obligation brought us many disadvantages. For example, in first YECA Solar, we had a Korean partner. They were to establish the factory and bring the know-how, and they said, if you are to export it, you will export it under my brand. You cannot launch a Turkish brand because I am bringing the technology, so you will produce it as a subcontractor. And if you develop any technology in your R&D facility, I will be able to use it anywhere globally, and you will not be able to sell it and take it out of Turkey. And the CEO will be from my company, the R&D head of R&D will be from my company, so everything was controlled. So we didn't agree. That's why they left in the end, and we showed that we can do it on our own. And today we have Karapınar solar panel, and it has achieved nearly 1,000 megawatt capacity. Therefore, YECA is very important. There are some criticisms about YECA and YECA RES project. Well, the project didn't come through for some reasons, and the biggest reason, actually, the local contribution rate was 65%. Today, no company can actually supply that because there were some issues with our partner. The prices were increased, the costs were increased. We interviewed with alternative suppliers, and none of them could supply 65%. And Mr. Farang asked, why are you not producing now that you have a factory? Why is it not operational for 3 years? Because if you have established a factory, you should produce, and they achieved 55% in YECA RES 2 and YECA RES 3. And you need a national brand in order to go beyond it. YECA is a very important mechanism, and I believe YECA should continue, and the only criteria is not increased capacity, but that should be supplied from the Turkish suppliers and Turkish workforce. We may continue with you after the second question. I will give the floor to Argun Karaca, and he has experience with pure energy, and the question is the same. It is about the allocation mechanisms. What is your experience with that? Thank you, Güray Bey. First of all, I would like to welcome you all and wish you a good afternoon. The process started in 2007, and it changed a lot in Turkey. It was very difficult to talk about renewable energy back then. However, we now see in such meetings that it is a very large industry employing 40,000 people now. And therefore, in this journey, we learned a lot. As pure energy, we produce power plants in Turkey and Germany, and they are totally renewable energy power plants. And we learned a lot through our experiences, and also we had experiences with our business partners. Turkey started this journey from scratch, and with YEKDEM mechanism it made a good progress. YEKDEM has been criticized so far because it was bringing along a significant cost, and actually we see it was the energy transformation called Energiewende in Germany, and we are able to compare it because we have gone through this process, and Turkey's YEKDEM costs were actually determined at an optimum level. And today we see that even if there is a certain cost, the cost is highly important for the development of the renewable energy. It also helps development of the local domestic technology, and that is thanks to the contribution from such allocation mechanisms. And it is highly important to take this forward. Today we have nearly 10,000 megawatts in wind and 10,000 in solar. Considering Germany, they have 65,000 in solar and 65 in wind, and for 2030 they are aiming at 200,000 megawatts. So it shows us there is a lot to do in the renewable. There is a huge potential, and therefore the process from now on should be planned with the lessons learned, because there has been a lot of discussion around these mechanisms, and the projects that are allocated should be constructed more easily with such mechanisms, and they should also be added after the allocation. Those power plants can be commissioned immediately, and the technology will be accelerated. That's one thing, and as they are developing more, the burden on TH will be decreased, because those are not the base loads that the network is used to, and that will be developed with the market operator. And in terms of energy supply security, it is critically important, and the legislation infrastructure needs to be developed. And when we look at the legislation in Germany, for example, we can learn this. Along with those lessons, we may see there are lots of lessons that can be learned thanks to such experiences. At the end of the day, we see that 150 megawatt has come to our lives, and this shows us we need every kilowatt of energy, and they are highly important for our country. They're valuable investments. In order to further develop it, we have to develop more advanced mechanisms, and the term of commissioning those projects should be shortened. Thank you. Well, it's the last session of the day. Still, we have lots of people in our room. Still, we have a concern about loss of rating. So I will give the floor to Necip Fazıl. Teyyaş declarations, announcements are the most curious ones for us. So, excuse me for my choice. I will give the floor to Emre Erdoğan now. He is from Enerjisa. He's responsible for the operations as the Deputy General Manager. Enerjisa also has conventional power plants along with renewable, so they have obtained the capacity allocation in different ways. And in the last week, they signed a deal with Enercon, and they now own 1000 megawatts. And what is your comment on the capacity allocation mechanisms? Well, the other panelists and participants have already mentioned the pros and cons of different mechanisms so far, and I would like to tell you what we experienced as an investor. First of all, as part of living in our country, we always expect the unexpected, and we now know that we should be prepared for any change at any time. And you need to study your alternatives earlier. After all the competitions we attended, that was our experience, and YK2 was another example. You apply for a region and you may develop the project in the places that you dream of, and at the end of the day there are places where you can develop after the permission, so they can be different. So you have to have your alternatives and you should be prepared for them. The permission processes could be eased, and what can be done about it? I think on that side the project development team has a vast knowledge now, and most importantly, while bringing in new capacities to our country, we should also bring some know-how and technology transfer to our country. We need to bring the competences to our country. On the other hand, as a player of this industry, the capacities should be realized by the stakeholders of the industry, and for that the distribution should be made in a way to realize it during the capacity allocation, because we have already experienced this. Maybe the sanctions and follow-up should be increased from now on, and within the week battery has been a major subject, and the capacities and applications are now discussed. So we experienced 2022 as well. Did we learn something from there? I think we need to use our agility in them as well. Overall, the capacity mechanisms so far, and being an investor in those capacities, have left these memories in my mind. Thank you for that, Necip Fazıl Bey. Now I would like to give the floor to you, Necip Fazıl Bakır. He is the critical name in capacity allocation. You are working as the branch director of planning, we have the investors and advisors and many stakeholders supporting the industry. We have our experiences on one side, and the public has its experiences. On behalf of TEAS, what can you share with us with respect to capacity allocation? Thank you. Before answering your question, I would like to tell you about the most recent figures, because the people think the capacity is being limited by TEAS, but the numbers say the otherwise. We have 9,000 megawatts in gas, and the total allocation has been 28,000 megawatts so far. So we have a project stock of 19,000 megawatts. And if I should tell you, we have allocated 4,600 megawatts to hybrid, and maybe 80% of them will be installed next to wind by the end of September in 2022. We have allocated capacity without a license, so the announcements are not made like the licensed parts. In the solar, there is not much change. Our installed capacity is around 28,000 megawatts, and it is important that those projects are realized. It's not only about capacity allocation. From TEAS perspective, from the planning perspective, I would say the faster the capacity is established, the better I can plan for the future. We talked about the example of Yeka 1 RES, and project was delayed in one way or another. Hopefully the project will be realized very soon. One of the biggest problems that we have is 700 megawatts in Tracker region. As long as it is not established, I have to plan what will happen if it is commissioned and what will happen if it is not commissioned. We would like to make sure that those capacities are realized immediately so that we will plan accordingly. We talked about the unlicensed, and capacity allocation is much faster. That is not something we like as TEAS, but because of the legislation, we are responsible for doing that. If they are meeting the criteria in the legislation, then we can give. And there are some unlicensed allocations up to 100 megawatts, and more than 90% of them are small ones, and it is not something that I can control actually. That's why we choose the major projects. It was also mentioned yesterday, there is an example from Germany, and Germany is a good example for sure, but from our perspective that's not a right example. Mr. Minister also spoke about this, because our position is different as compared to Germany. Germany is right in the center of Europe, and they have 66 interconnected lines with the neighboring countries. Another advantage is that France is rich in nuclear, because as a country that has the highest amount of interconnections, so Germany can easily sell to the neighboring countries if there is a surplus, and they can easily supply from the neighboring countries if there is a deficit. As for the energy transfer, it may change every year, but every year we can see that Germany has exported 20 times more in terms of energy, and it means they are able to meet the demand from the neighboring countries. As for the capacity allocation, I can say the competition that has been completed the fastest was the solar competitions, and that could also be increased and higher warranty could be demanded. After the temporary acceptance of the power plants, those proposed rates were being paid, and those power plants can be commissioned much more quickly. And so far I've seen that this is the right methodology to accelerate the process, and the new model in YEKAs is also very nice. If they can finish earlier, they can sell at a better price with more incentive, and the companies developing YEKA also already know planning a line and then preparing the projects. Appropriation and commissioning may take 3 to 4 years, and we then the 44 or 46 months of incentive may not make sense, but this way any methodology to further accelerate the commissioning of the power plants will be more advantageous for us. Thank you. We have obtained different experiences in every part of those capacity allocations. We have been involved in various competitions, but today there are 280 power plants and 4,200 turbines. As you may remember, we had a target of 20 gigawatt for 2023, and in YEKA we had 25 gigawatt target. In Turek we're now talking about 30 to 35 gigawatts, and from now on there will be capacity allocations through independent competitions, and this will be more than the capacity YEKAs have brought along. And the head of Energy Market Regulator Authority has also made announcement to the media, so there will be more capacity available through the energy storage, and we will start the investments hopefully, so another window will be open to our life. After all those experiences, what is it that we exactly desire for the future? Not only what we have experienced, but also what do we aim at? Like any other country, we have some national targets, the share of wind and a carbon-free network, and the distribution companies should do their part here. We may start with you, Ömer Fatih. So what will be the future? One model is not realistic. We have the YEKA model now, and we have the local producers, and they will develop their projects, so it is not realistic to expect that all the projects will be YEKA. There is the domestic producer, but we also we need to make sure that they go back to the real prices. In the last YEKA, the first 66 months were urgent because we needed energy immediately. The earlier it was to be established, that makes more sense, because when you produce it locally, and there is a profit that we make when it is commissioned 1 year earlier. So steps were taken for that purpose, and there is a new allocation method, which is storage, and the industry has evolved into this. I don't know what Necip will say about it. The regulations have not yet been issued, and there will be a 15 to 20,000 capacity, and there is an application of 45,000 megawatts, and the law says anyone who commits storage can involve in a competition for solar and wind as much as their capacity. And Mustafa also declared that to Anadolu Agency, and we're not going towards November the 1st. I believe the industry is now in its mastery. I don't want to have 20 or 30 megawatt projects, because when I do 200 megawatt, I again handle the same agriculture people or forest people. So I have to have bigger projects, and the storage will let us do this. And those major projects actually will take us forward. Why did TH allow this? The wind and solar power plants have hourly fluctuations and intraday fluctuations, and TH can handle it, but in case of sudden fluctuations, the system has to be starting working because of the frequency. That's why there is a one-on-one rate. It is for the purpose of absorbing the imbalance. For Uşak RES, we made a study what happens on one-on-one and one-on-two. In one-on-one, we can absorb the hourly fluctuations, but when it is one-on-two, it is a more flat curve, but when it is 1/1000, it will be a flat curve. So we will be able to start RES without any competition. We will not have to do this on lower prices, and energy prices are higher as compared to the earlier years. There was a listing for our company, and the long-term company price was not accepted as $50. The energy prices are around 220, but nobody really think it will be less than 80 or 100. That's an advantage, and we don't have the energy storages yet. And there are those that will be established. However, on the foreign countries, there is 95 gigawatt storage facilities, and the prices will be decreased when there is twice the demand. The prices will be cut into two, and with that the projects will be more profitable. And not every company had their map for the wind, and now we have 9,000 megawatt project that I actually develop. I can undertake it if I get a permission. You don't have the time for micrositing. There is no problem with development. You know the risks. For example, environmental impact assessment is completed. We know the shortcuts as well, and therefore we'll have to do the competition in 2007 and conclude it in 2011 and start construction in 2014. We are all hungry for the megawatts. Now we would like to see the outcomes, and that's why we are very excited about this system. There is also YEKDEM. The new YEKDEM looks low. However, if you go before 2013, it was again very low. What was it giving us? Without YEKDEM, the market price would be zero, but the current model is $55, for example, so that will be the lowest price. And with the market analysis prices, the prices will be set and the models will be completed. So having YEKDEM is really great, but we shouldn't expect it to be around 80 to 100 USD. But there is a guarantee from the state until 2025, and I think we can easily find financing with these systems. As I said earlier, with the integrated storage facilities, the momentary production will be more systemic, and we will learn about this even more. We will be Braver and Teyash will probably open more capacities if we can melt down the capacity available now. I believe there will be more capacity in the future. Thank you for that, Murtaza Bey. You have won 2 major YEKAs, each 1000 megawatt, and you are the biggest company in YEKA. And do you think we should continue with YEKAs, or do you think there should be a mixed model and the other models should work along with YEKA? Well, what will happen from now on in line with our experiences? What did I do? We made investments in YEKA. However, what we will do from now on depends on our target. Our target is we're open to energy investments. We would like to do them as soon as possible. On the other hand, we have to make sure that we do not distort the macroeconomic balances. And there is the local domestic production and the national production. Fiat Renault is carrying out the domestic production here. Why did we have TOG? Because we wanted to have our own brand. The tower producers are producing towers here, and the turbine supplier calculates the cost of the tower producer while ordering the turbine, and for example sells this system to Colombia and makes 100% profit. Therefore, we have to move from the production with the low added value to the high added value, because as long as the current deficit continues like this, we will see that as problems in energy and food and everywhere else. I believe there is this problem. Therefore, in YEKTA mechanism, especially on the wind side, yes, we have a brand in the sun, but we need more than one. Today, Kalyon PV is producing integrated solar panel, and it is the only facility that can produce fully integrated solar panels without importing even a single needle from China. We are able to produce the solar panels here, but we have a very low capacity here, so we have to increase it in consideration of our experience. We have to maintain YEKA. And while doing that, I'm seeing it as a criticism for the past. After YEKA 1, in YEKA 2, we saw the domestic share was decreased. There was an obligation of factory and it was removed. There is a scale economy. We go out to the market and we say, for example, we will do rotors, and they ask us how many parts will you build, and the price is twice the import price. I think it should be more than that. Therefore, the strategic mistake made is that the technologic limit shouldn't have been decreased. It was 65%, it should have continued in 65. Now we have 55% rate. You can even import a nacelle. You can build your generator here and you can send it to Germany, and you don't even need to assemble it here, because they have an integration team there. They don't want to employ Turkish engineers because they say they have a readily available facility. So my first criticism for the following YEKAs, the domestic technology requirement shouldn't be decreased. That was wrong to do so, and we should make sure that it comes back to the same level. And the same happened with YEKA Solar. I do make ingot and I produce wafer with that, then chip is produced with that wafer, and there is now a very significant crisis. I make cells with wafer, and what happened, the blue wafer was considered to be domestic. Blue wafer is actually import of the cells, then we upgrade it to black wafer, because this policy is really great in YECA, but how great that policy is determined by the stability of that policy. Even if it is perfect, we have to be stable there. Another criticism is mini YECA. We have our YECTA mechanism, which is very nice, and we are able to identify projects with different scales. What is the purpose of YECA? The purpose of YECA is to increase the capacity of renewable energy with our domestic and national technologies that cannot be done with mini. We have made gas YECAs of 10 megawatts or 20 megawatts. However, we have a YECTA mechanism there, and we need to revert YECA to the original sets. This is my thought, and the purpose here is to take the domestic technology further away. For example, we import pure silica from States and America. In the next phase, we can add silica, because the raw material is quartz, which means it's earth, sand. We will get the sand and enrich it, and we produce silica, and that is the same as the glass industry. It is quartz. We already have it, and we should support it. And when we move it to the next level, we can make sure that it is independent. The American companies are asking for panels from us because the American government has put a barrier for the Chinese panels, and there is a tracking system in Malaga, Spain. There's a conference on November 30, and the subject is traceability in solar panels. Why? Because they want to go to the final resource, and they want it not to be Chinese. And we have been approved for export to the US market. There is no Chinese content in our product. So this is a very huge advantage for Turkey. If we were to produce 5 gigawatt panels, that would be very effective on the current deficit, because if I'm selling the panel for 44 or 45 cents, its added value is 100%. So it means $220 million out of $404 million. But that added value is only 5% when we import the cells. YECDAM must continue, but it must continue in USD. We have to be realistic, and I agree with you. It was 5 cents when YECDAM was first released. It shouldn't be less than it or more than it. So there must be a predictability. So there will be a margin, and YECDAM must be continued. YECA must go back to its original sets for capacity allocation mechanism. Another important thing is self-consumption. There are major industrial companies. In our factory, we are consuming 160 million kilowatt energy. I have to have 120 megawatts for my self-consumption, and I am not given a connection. In investments for self-consumption, maybe if 100 megawatts will be established, 20 megawatt storage could be established, and we can start with that. That would be increasing the export capability of the industry, because we will be able to decrease our costs, and in the long run it will be great for predictability, because the most important input is energy in that factory. So we have to ease the allocation mechanism for self-consumption, and we should make it a trade, because there is a market and there is a need for self-consumption. The market aims at competition, and the purpose of competition is to make sure that the consumer accesses to the affordable prices. So market cannot be created in any other way. And with respect to storage, I would like to say in 2007 those people were coming to YECDAM, and recently we have been talking about there is no purchase guarantee. It is subject to the market prices. I have personally experienced this. The price is 7 cents or 8 cents in the market, but there is no guarantee to buy. I discussed it a lot with the banks. They said it's 2 cents because there is a risk, and they want a sponsor guarantee from yourself. You have to give a letter of guarantee, and that takes you away from your project financing. It might be 20 cents today, and in the upcoming years there will be no more 5 cents. It will be more than that. When you go to the bank, you can see 30 gigawatts, 10 gigawatts. So along with along with the storage, it will mean a very huge amount of investment. It is 24 months to take the permission, or 3 years. In 3 years the price will be 6-7 cents, and the investors, significant banks, will ask for an equivalent 1-to-1 maybe. Therefore YEKTA mechanism, YEKA mechanism, they are all, even if the prices are low as a result of the competition, they have a purchase guarantee, and profitability is very high here. And it is also criticized, in the tender setting there is a bidding and the people go to unbelievable prices. And maybe, this is about your assessments. Maybe you can have 3 rounds, and in every round the highest price will be decreased, will be eliminated, and you can finish it in 3 rounds. So we can bring them to reasonable levels with some creative solutions. Therefore the local production is very important, and the capacity allocation mechanisms cannot be differentiated from here, and it will only make our economy more fragile. Therefore YEKTA has to continue. Maybe it will be 4 cents or 5 cents. It has to continue, and everyone who asks for it should be given, if they agree, it for 3 cents. Just like the storage, maybe you can add storage next to it and you can say it is only 20%, but YEKA must continue. Or that could be 2000 megawatt, and they can ask for a factory of 4 gigawatts. Today, if we had 4 gigawatt solar panel factory, that would bring a great added value to our economy. Why are we discussing all of them? Because not only at home but also in the global markets we can create a sector, and the capacity allocation must be continued. Therefore there will be volume, competition, predictability, sustainability. They all will be together, because if you do not aim at the global markets, if you only aim at the domestic market, you cannot be really successful. As for the capacity allocation, APH energy prices should also be added. Do you see any impact here, or regardless of the method, do you think there should be large projects? Murtaza Bey described that in detail, and I don't want to repeat his words. As you also said, I would like to give a different perspective. Firstly, in capacity allocation mechanisms, a hybrid approach would be very reasonable and meaningful, because it will encourage the development of the technology and it will be great for our country. However, in the long run, what is more sustainable is the market mechanisms, and with the market mechanisms the capacities should be allocated, and the more they function, the better the supply demand operates, and the less we intervene through regulatory bodies and with different interventions. If we do not interrupt the operation of the market, I believe the market will find its route. When we intervene the market, we delay the market to stand on its own feet, and actually we reduce the dynamism of the market. That is the first part of it, and maybe I will touch on it later on, because every mega trend on earth requires the capacity to be allocated to the rational investors in proper ways. There is a tender psychology in Turkey. They lose themselves, and as Teyash also said, that capacity is kept because they lost themselves, and they all have their excuses and their reasons or something reasonable for themselves, but the truth doesn't change at the end of the day, because when we are unable to realize the capacity, we only watch it from a distance, and our experience shows us that in the competition in 2017 and in other similar competitions, this was considered to buy an option only, and many investors had this thought, and at the first chance they refunded their guarantees for the pre-licenses by returning the pre-licenses. And if we are making a rule here, we have to make sure that it is consistently practiced. If someone will be hurt, they have to be hurt, because this is a very serious thing. The national supply security it also relates to our national security as Turkey. Therefore, when a competition is held here or when it is allocated through another method, it's not reasonable to keep that capacity not in use. That could be an advance payment, or that could be evolving the guarantees into a hurting mechanism for the applicants. That should be considered. And secondly, the market mechanisms must be made operational. Right now, we see a conjunctural opportunity from China. Turkey is a very strong country with its ports and with its transportation facilities. If there is this advantage here, we must allow the market to operate. And if Murtaza Bey has an opportunity to export there, then the market should enable them, and this way they will be more easily able to find credits. And also, when we create a projection accordingly, and when the people invest by counting on this, then I believe the consistency of the capacity mechanism will also be improved, and that will enable the international investors to come to Turkey as well, and that will enable more know-how to be created in our country. Therefore, during the allocation, it should be followed to make sure that they are realized, and the market mechanisms should be allowed to operate. Well, we understand one method doesn't have an advantage or disadvantage on the other, as long as it is practical and the result is true. And the market should be allowed to operate so that there will be a depth and a scale. And I will ask the same question to you, Necip Fazıl Bey. For Teyash, do you think any allocation method is different from the other? Well, there is no difference for us. because there is a solar or wind plant and we have to operate the network. Therefore, the capacity allocation mechanism doesn't change much for us. But if we should look at it in general, the biggest income of the industrialists is the electricity. There's also the carbon certificates, and capacity allocation mechanism should be continued. As Murtaza Bey said, the storage will be added to them and the limits will be opened. This is something that we're discussing right now. And on the other hand, the domestic technology will be expanded, and in order to decrease the risks, more affordable RERAs can be used to maintain the capacity. That makes sense as well. In the unlicensed part, the prices are too high, but over here there might be lower prices with RERAs. And as mentioned by Ömer Bey, there is an application of 45,000 megawatts, but it is for individual storage in RES and GES. The secondary legislation has not been issued yet, and as mentioned earlier, the second legislation is on its way. And Mr. Minister Mustafa Bey also said that 15,000 megawatt capacity will be allocated to them. And for the future RERAs, the storage method can be used. Why storage? Ömer Bey shortly introduced solar and wind are interrupted energy resources, so we can eliminate the interruptions with multiple methods. One is the dams, hydroelectricity, and during the drought season you may not have them as redundancy during the summertime. And secondly, we can have the batteries or hydroelectricity plants with pumping. As I said before, we roughly have 55 to 50,000 megawatt allocation, and when compared to the installed power today, it will be 55 to 50% rate of solar and wind. Therefore, the imbalance will be increased. That's why we require storage. Is storage enough? There is also another subject. We may have nuclear and coal or geothermal. There will be more inertia in our system. Inertia means if there is any failure, your largest unit can have a fault, and when you lose one unit in the nuclear plant, it will mean losing 1,200 megawatts from the system. And when you lose 400 megawatts over 1,200 megawatts, it will mean you will need an inertia so that the system will stay neutral at 50 kilohertz, but we cannot ensure the inertia with the storage now. In Europe and UK, they're working on virtual inertia. Maybe we can have the virtual inertia, and thanks to storage we will have better integration with solar and wind. As I said, we carry out our activities as TIASH. In one of our activities, we're working on the network flexibility, and we should also consider, we don't know how fast the storage will come. Local domestic production is one thing, and there's also the funding part and the labor part. There are multiple aspects here. When renewable increases too much, the share of coal and natural gas will be decreased, and they will shut down the plants. In a contrary scenario, especially during the winter time, the storage that we have, the solar and the wind, may be insufficient, and we may not be able to meet the consumption. That's why we have different scenarios, like more solar, more wind, more storage, high consumption and little consumption. So we have been carrying out our analysis over 8.7 million hours, and we are still studying them. And also, we all want the renewable to be increased, and whatever can be done about them, it's the technical indicators can be controlled and storage can be increased, and the authorization to instruct TEAS if TEAS could be provided with more data, the capacity allocation could be increased, and we are also working on how to increase it even further. Thank you. In capacity allocation, TEAS is the determinant organization, and as a result of the allocation mechanisms, TEAS has been one of the major beneficiaries here. We know they have been turned into public investments in order to increase them. The capacity increase will be in our life. As I know, Energisa has won its projects from every allocation mechanism. Do you choose a single method or a mixed method? It is not easy to defend a single method, actually. In general, with the sustainability perspective, what we want to achieve is to meet the demands of the industry. There will be carbon taxes, and when we take them into consideration as well, we would like to be carbon free or emission free, or we would like to minimize our emissions. That's the desire at the end of the day, and there might be some bottlenecks. Europe also experiences the same, but the general trend is a carbon free world. I believe we all agree on this, and in order to ensure it, we require use of renewable energy, and we need to offer that to the consumers after producing from the natural resources. And in order to do that, almost all the investors care about the financing first, and there, instead of a single mechanism, those projects need to be financed and different mechanisms should be used, and that will be the right method. And while doing it, renewable is an interrupted source of generation, therefore there will be imbalances, and when we are able to integrate them to the battery systems, that will help us. And for a while we have heard from different partners as well, there is the green hydrogen, and that might also be used as a balancing mechanism, and new mechanisms can be put into operation, and this way the renewable resources can be enabled and offered to all of the users. So we have to use them as different instruments. They are USD and Euro based resources, and they actually ease the financing for the investors, and larger capacities are something that we like, and that allows us to have more installed power, and we will be able to be more flexible. That's why they are important. And here we need to use all the instruments to be offered by the market, and this way we will be able to use our renewable resources. We say people come to Turkey in order to see the sun from Germany, but Germany has 6 or 7 times more installed power. So we need to be faster, and while going faster, we should also be doing it in a right way, and we have to consider the imbalances as well. So I am actually happy to see that there is an agreement here. You have been mentioning the capacity allocation with mixed methods. Due to time limitation, I would like to give you all one more round, and if we have time, we may complete the session with few questions. We may start with you. Actually, we have been trying to turn it into Turkish PPAs, YETAs, along with the resource allocation methods. Do you think it will accelerate the projects? It will definitely accelerate them. In the end, when your customer is ready, when you know where to look, the investment and financing can be handled much more quickly. And on the investment and financing side, it will bring a good contribution. And that should be considered as a beneficial mechanism. Does Teyash have any idea or any comment on this? Well, this is something financial, and as Teyash, we cannot really make much comment. I want to add one more thing. As long as we do those capacity allocations from one pool, that will be much better. When we allocate the capacity, the time will be different in licensed and unlicensed, and with YEKA and without YEKA. They all should be managed from one pool, one repository, and we consider the solar and wind in the same pool. It is not really unreasonable, but solar can be installed much more quickly, and the land issue can be resolved much more quickly, and the share could be stolen. So if we can manage them from one pool only, that will be much easier for us. Haldun Bey, what do you like to say about the bilateral agreements? Well, one of our main operations is this. We have a wind portfolio of 500 megawatt in Germany. YETA was first used by us, and in order to propagate it, we put a lot of efforts, and therefore what we see there, without making use of any state support mechanism, it totally brings together the supply and the demand, because the renewable energy demand is indispensable along with the carbon neutral target, and it will be even more critical. EU will be implementing the carbon practices, and this will be bringing the market mechanisms into forefront without needing any other mechanism. When you do a PPA, a YETA, and that brings predictability to the investor, and it will also be giving a predictable financing setting to the bank, and on the buyer's side, it will allow them to hedge their prices, so it will create predictability for them as well. And if I should give a concrete example, we're already doing it in Germany, and there are plans of extension in Turkey now, and LLVB, KfW provide long-term financing, and they require a PPA from them, and we are now working on it, on a YETA structure, and whether or not it is bankable. And if you were to ask me if I were to do the allocation based on this, yes, they said yes. Therefore, I wanted to give this concrete example. In the upcoming period, we will see YETAs more, and that will enable our capacity to be increased and to reach the scale economy much faster. You gave us a concrete example about Kalyon factory. You said you need a 120 megawatts plant to supply energy to your own factory. If there was a renewable energy supply contract, would you go for it, or would you go for your own investment? Well, as an energy company and as an investor in energy, I would rather do it by myself. YETA implicitly exists in Turkey. The factory is established for self-consumption, YETA, but the producing legal entity must be the same as the consuming legal entity. And if the person here is given a chance, that will be possible, but the matter here is the restriction in capacity allocation. We couldn't get a capacity for 90 megawatts for our factory, but someone who consumes more than me was able to obtain it. I was consuming 160 and that was 250. How can that be overcome? The YETAs can find its place in the market very quickly, and they may turn into an important instrument for the free market to settle, because many people answer your question yes. They may say those companies who are already into it should be doing it, and as I said earlier, with a regulation and storage that will be enabled. With storage, YETAs will be even more propagated. It will also help increase the credit for the investor. Only the major companies have this credit, limited number of companies have them, but that will be established as well. Better regulations must be done as soon as possible, and it will help deepening the liberal market. Ömer Fatih will complete this session with your opinion. We can have one or two questions depending on our time. Within IDEM, there are plants that are almost completing their YEKDEM, and if you were to do YETA, what would you say? We already do it. We are a vertically integrated energy company. We have our distribution company as well, and we are connected to the final consumer. We've been selling it to them, and the group also does it, but YEKDEM is issued by the state because it is bankable and the banks accept it. However, in YETA, no matter how much credit note you have, you cannot actually invest by counting on them, because you don't know what the other company will do. And if I don't make the investment, financing will be difficult. In order to hedge for a few years, that can be done, but in the end, that investor will say it's very easy to do, I will do it by myself. And therefore, I don't see a future here, but it is a nice assurance, and it doesn't necessarily mean we don't need YEKDEM. That is something that should be in the market. This trade will be done through a win-win mechanism. Thank you very much. This is one of the benefits of our Congress here, to share the experiences and share ideas as TÜREP management. We want the SMEs to be able to sign YETA, and we believe there should be an assurance mechanism behind it, and credit guarantee fund or a similar structure could be created, and those companies which are not considered to be bankable could sign YETA individually or collectively, and there should be a solution for them. That's one of the areas of study for us in the upcoming period. We can have 2 questions from the room, one from the left and one from the right section, if anyone has any question. Kıvanç Görkem, thank you for this fruitful session. YECAs sound well, but who can count on YETA and make an agreement of 15 years? That's something we should start with. Maybe I could respond. When you look at continent Europe, they have to be standardized contracts that must be binding. You're right. If we want these projects to be funded in 12, 13-year contracts, we have to sign the contracts that will not be breached. The YECTAM that we knew ended in the continental Europe, and the PPA YETA started with that. Therefore, there is an acceptance on all the parties, obviously. And therefore, in the contract culture, we should cover progress. That's true. There is this risk, but those risks can be managed. For example, there will of course be a guarantee if you're signing a 15-year YETA. You can get a guarantee of the sales price for 6 months or 1 year, and they may lose it if they cancel. As long as you have electricity in your hand, you can say, if YETA is broken, I can sign a YETA with someone else. If I go out there in the market and if I say I have electricity and this is the price, there is no risk, I believe, because electricity is a very good commodity. At a time when YETAs increase, maybe the state will not want you to do so. The most critical thing here, if we are to run a mechanism like YETA, the price interventions are very sensitive things, and the state should not interfere there and let it give it to the market mechanisms. There is also a validation aspect here, and therefore it can be considered as something with 3 pillars, and bank could be present there as a guarantor. And while creating the YETAs, more creative mechanisms could be created this way, depending on certain criteria like corridors, and some certain levels could be evaluated again. Therefore, such innovative and creative mechanisms will be helpful in the long term, and it will help the YETAs sustain. We'll get one more question and complete this session. I think there is no other question. Everyone is happy. I've really enjoyed discussing these topics with our participants here. Thank you very much for your participation. We will be here again on the second day of our Congress. Thank you and have a nice evening.